Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to face death in front of a cheering crowd? Imagine standing in a cold town square, the smell of iron and fire in the air, while a man dressed in black sharpens a metal hook that gleams in the morning light. This wasn't just a tool, it was a message, one that said, "Obey, or you'll end up on this hook." Welcome to the terrifying world of the executioner's hook, a weapon designed not only to kill, but to humiliate, tear, and torture without mercy. Before we dive into this dark chapter of history, don't forget to like and subscribe to Dark Pages of History, because what you're about to hear will make you see medieval justice in a way you never imagined. Now, let's pull back the curtain on the tool that turned death into a public performance. But first, a question. Why would anyone invent something so cruel when swords and axes already existed? Well, that's where the story gets even darker. The executioner's hook was born in medieval Europe, a time when fear ruled stronger than law. It wasn't invented by soldiers or warriors, but by blacksmiths following orders from kings, inquisitors, and even the church. The goal wasn't just to end a life, but to make death itself a warning. Picture a long iron shaft, ending in a curved metal hook, sometimes sharp enough to pierce flesh, sometimes blunt enough to rip it. It wasn't elegant like a sword, nor quick like a guillotine. It was slow, brutal, and unforgettable. Why a hook? Because it symbolized something primal: capture, punishment, and shame. To be hooked meant you were trapped, displayed, and broken. Here's the terrifying part. The hook wasn't always used to kill immediately. Sometimes it was used to drag prisoners through the streets. Other times, it was used to hang their bodies, alive or dead, for days, as a warning to everyone who passed by. And that's not the worst part. The people demanded it. They came to see the spectacle, to feel safe knowing justice had been served. But what they didn't know was how much darker things were about to get. If you think death by beheading was cruel, wait until you hear how the hook worked. There were three main kinds: the impaling hook, the hanging hook, and the tearing hook. Each had its own horrifying purpose. The impaling hook was used to drive through the body, sometimes from the back, through the chest, even out of the mouth. Victims could remain alive for hours, even days. The hanging hook was designed to suspend a body, often by the ribs, shoulders, or under the jaw. Every breath was agony. And the tearing hook, perhaps the most horrifying, was used to drag flesh apart, piece by piece. Executioners were trained for precision. Their job wasn't only to kill, but to control suffering. Too quick, and the crowd would be disappointed. Too slow, and the executioner might lose his head next. Imagine the sound: metal scraping against bone, the gasps of the crowd, the prayers whispered by those waiting their turn. It's a haunting image, right? But here's something that will shock you even more. People paid money for front-row seats to these events. Executions were treated like theater. Vendors sold food, children watched, musicians played. Death became entertainment. You might be wondering, how could human beings watch something so inhumane? Well, the same question echoes through history every time cruelty becomes normalized. And it always starts with fear. Let's shift our focus to the man behind the hook, the executioner. He was both feared and despised. People avoided his gaze in daylight, but begged for his services when night fell. Executioners were isolated from society. They lived outside city walls, forbidden from entering churches or markets. Yet, their work was essential. Without them, justice couldn't exist. They trained for years, mastering anatomy and pain. They needed to know exactly where to strike, how to hang, how to tear. Not too deep, not too shallow. One wrong move could make a ruler furious. Some executioners became infamous celebrities. Their tools, the hook, the axe, the rope, were extensions of their identity. And over time, the hook became a symbol of their authority. Here's a strange irony. Many executioners were deeply religious. They believed they were cleansing the sinner's soul by separating it from the body. To them, the hook wasn't just a weapon, it was divine punishment. But there's a darker truth. Even executioners sometimes broke. They drank heavily, suffered nightmares, and were haunted by the faces of those they killed. Because no matter how righteous the punishment seemed, the human soul never forgets. Let's take a moment to picture it again. A wooden platform in the center of town, drums beating, people shouting. And there it is, the iron hook hanging in the sunlight, waiting. Public executions were treated as lessons. Parents brought their children to teach them morality. Priests gave speeches about sin and redemption. But underneath that pious surface, there was thrill, a rush of power that came from watching someone else's suffering. The hook became a stage prop in the theater of terror, and rulers used that terror to keep control. Think about it. If you can make your people fear death enough, you never have to fight rebellion. That's why the hook was more than a tool. It was a message from the throne. You are powerless. Crazy to think, right? People actually cheered as bodies swayed on hooks. And yet, if you replace the hook with a screen and the square with social media, are we really that different today? The hook traveled across cultures and centuries, from Europe to the Ottoman Empire to Asia. Everywhere it went, it carried the same message. Fear keeps order. In some places, it was used on rebels. In others, on traitors or heretics. Sometimes, it wasn't even about crime. It was about power. Kings, emperors, inquisitors all used the hook to show that their authority was absolute. And people believed that watching such punishment would keep society pure. But behind the spectacle was a quiet truth. Power maintained through pain never lasts. The more people feared the hook, the more they hated those who wielded it. And eventually something had to give. You can almost feel it. The slow turn of history, the whispers of rebellion, the rise of human conscience. And that's where our story begins to change. By the 18th century, the world began to change. The Age of Enlightenment brought new ideas, reason, rights, and reform. People started questioning the morality of torture. Writers and philosophers argued that justice should be fair, not cruel. Slowly, hooks, racks, and wheels were abandoned. Public executions were banned in many countries. Executioners disappeared into history books, but even as the hook vanished from sight, its memory didn't. Museums, paintings, and forgotten prisons still keep its shadow alive, a reminder of how brutal humans can be when fear replaces empathy. And yet every time society grows divided or angry, that same darkness whispers again, because the line between justice and vengeance is thinner than we think. Today, the executioner's hook stands as a symbol, not of power, but of warning. It tells us what happens when justice loses its humanity. It reminds us that cruelty, once normalized, spreads like fire. History isn't just about remembering facts, it's about recognizing patterns. The hook shows us that fear was once a tool of control, and maybe still is, just in subtler ways. So the next time you walk through a museum or read about ancient punishments, remember, those who built the hook weren't monsters. They were people, just like us. They believed they were right. And that's what makes it so terrifying, and that is the story of the executioner's hook, a tool forged not only from iron, but from fear itself. A tool that reminded people every day of what it meant to live under the shadow of absolute power. But before you move on, take a moment to think, how far have we really come from those days? Back then, rulers used hooks and pain to control people's lives. Today, power doesn't always come from torture or chains. It comes from information, from what we understand and what we ignore. That's the real lesson hidden in this dark chapter of history. Because even though the executioner's hook disappeared centuries ago, the idea behind it, control through fear, still finds new ways to survive. It might not hang in a public square anymore, but it hides in systems, decisions, and silence. If this story made you feel something, fear, anger, or even curiosity, that's good. It means you're awake to the truth that history isn't just about the past. It's a mirror reflecting who we are today. So, if you want to keep exploring the hidden corners of our world, not just the darkness, but the power of knowledge that breaks it, then like this video, subscribe to Dark Pages of History, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss what comes next. Now, as the end screen appears, click on the next video, The Power of Compounding. Because while fear once ruled through pain, today, real power grows quietly through patience, wisdom, and time.